The day Leonardo got engaged to his beloved was deliberately chosen to coincide with my departure for Sea City to attend university. He told his fiancée, "Emily is troublesome, and you're gentle by nature. From now on, let her stay in Sea City and forbid her from coming back." Our mutual friends were worried, fearing that I might find out and rush back to the capital in the middle of the night, throwing a tantrum. But they didn't know I wouldn't throw a tantrum, nor would I ever return. Before leaving for Sea City, I had already accepted someone else's proposal. In just half a month, I was going to be married. Before the wedding, I packed up all the gifts Leonardo had given me over the past 10 years and sent them back to the capital, including the ring I had once cherished as if it were a treasure. From that moment on, life took us down separate roads, each to our own path. Chapter 1. The last time I confessed my feelings to Leonardo, I made a complete fool of myself. The private room was full of people, yet the air was heavy with silence. No one said a word. Minutes passed. Finally, Juliet, seated beside him, got up to break the awkwardness. "All right, Leonardo, stop this. You're making it so hard on Emily. She's still just a child." Someone scoffed from a corner of the room. A 21-year-old still being called a child? Seriously. Snickers rippled through the crowd, spreading like wildfire. I stubbornly stood my ground, refusing to flee in humiliation, but my gaze on Leonardo gradually blurred. "Emily, do you really want me to say it in a way that's even harsher?" Leonardo flicked the ash off his cigarette and stood up. "I already made it clear when you were 16. I couldn't stop the lump in my throat. But back then, when I was in a young relationship, you were clearly very upset. That's because you're the adopted daughter of the Koo family," he said, his tone sharp. "One misstep from you, and it's the Koo family's reputation that suffers." "What about the kiss on my 18th birthday?" Leonardo's gaze flickered with faint disdain. "Emily, you were drunk that night and made an absolute scene. I only kissed you to put an end to the chaos as quickly as possible." I suddenly laughed, but the more I laughed, the harder the tears fell. "Leonardo, you've had 4 girlfriends, but every single time, all I had to do was throw a tantrum, and you'd break up with them. Can you really say you don't like me at all?" "That's because I hadn't met someone I truly cared about," he replied without hesitation. Then, without warning, he pulled Juliet into his arms. "Emily, listen carefully. I'll only say this one last time. I love Juliet, and I'm going to marry her. Your little tricks won't work on me anymore." Juliet looked up at him with a shy, joyful smile, her eyes brimming with admiration. Leonardo, without hesitation, he lowered his head and kissed her. Juliet wrapped her arms around his neck and stood on her tiptoes to return his kiss. They kissed passionately, oblivious to the room full of people. In that moment, my mind wandered to the kiss on my 18th birthday. It had been just as intense, just as lingering. It had fueled a dream that lasted 4 years. A dream I had foolishly believed in. I had stupidly thought he might actually like me. Chapter 2. Leonardo moved out of the Koo family estate. He started living with Juliet. The day he moved, I was busy with my graduation defense at school. Choosing such a day was likely a precaution to prevent me from causing a scene. But this time, I didn't react the way I used to, rushing to Leonardo to cry and make a fuss. Instead, after a brief ripple in my heart, I shook my head and brushed it all aside. That evening, I attended a graduation dinner with a few close classmates. On my way to the restroom, I ran into Juliet. "Emily, Leonardo is here too. Do you want to come over?" I shook my head. "I'm here with my classmates. I won't be joining you." Suddenly, Juliet's eyes reddened. "Emily, I know I don't come from a good family, and Uncle Koo and Aunt Koo already dislike me. Could you stop speaking poorly of me in front of them?" I was stunned and taken aback. "Miss Song, I've never even mentioned you to them." Juliet gave a sorrowful smile. "I know you've loved Leonardo for many years. It's understandable that you're struggling to accept him being with me. But, Emily, as women, shouldn't we strive to be kinder in our actions? I take after my mother, direct and incapable of scheming." Hearing this, I immediately got defensive. "Juliet, stop making up lies and slandering me." Before I could finish, Juliet's legs buckled, and she dropped to her knees. "Emily, I'm begging you, Startled, I rushed to help her up, but before I could touch her, she collapsed heavily to the ground. Emily, what are you doing? Leonardo's furious voice rang out. At the same time, a powerful shove hit me. I was pushed hard, my knee slamming against the edge of the wall. The pain was excruciating. Chapter 3. Leonardo. Don't misunderstand. Emily didn't mean it. You're still defending her? I've had enough of her antics since we were kids. Leonardo bent down to pick up Juliet. He glared at me coldly, his eyes blazing with anger. Emily, apologize. Leonardo, shut up and apologize. Juliet curled up in his arms, crying softly, looking so delicate and pitiful. My knee was bleeding. The blood trickled down my shin and pooled at my ankle. 2 glaring streaks of crimson, but it was as if Leonardo didn't even see it. The way he looked at me, it was as though I was some unforgivable villain. I let out a bitter laugh, unwilling to argue even a single word more. I'm sorry. Leonardo seemed momentarily taken aback, but then his expression darkened further. Not enough. I straightened up and bowed deeply. Is this enough for you? Juliet glanced at me, the corners of her lips curling slightly, but then she quickly sniffled and turned to Leonardo with teary eyes, softly pleading, let it go. Leonardo, how could I possibly deserve such an apology? Leonardo's heart immediately softened. Emily, I've told you before, Juliet is different from others. Bullying her won't make me break up with her. It'll only make me cherish her more and despise you further. With that, he carried Juliet and walked away. I stood there, motionless. For a long, long time, the wound on my knee hurt terribly, but my heart felt empty and light. I knew it. At that very moment, all those so-called obsessions and unrequited love, they crumbled to dust, and were gone completely. Chapter 4. That night, Juliet posted 3 updates on her social media. Screenshots of these posts, especially Leonardo's comments, were promptly sent to me by those who clearly had ulterior motives. I knew they secretly wanted to mock me. In the past, I would have acted on impulse, rushing to Leonardo, crying and causing a scene. He'd be annoyed but would always give in eventually. This illusion of his concern had emboldened me, pushing me to persist despite setbacks. But this time, I didn't react. Instead, I made a phone call I'd been hesitant about for 7 days. Aunt Zhao, this is Emily. I've made up my mind about what you mentioned the other day. When I was 7, my parents died unexpectedly. Uncle Ku, who had been close to my father, decided to take me in. Aunt Zhao, on the other hand, had been my mother's closest friend during her youth. However, she had eloped with her lover, cutting off contact with everyone. By the time she settled down in Sea City after years of wandering, my parents were already gone. Aunt Zhao wanted me to move to Sea City and fulfill an old promise she made to my mother. She wanted me to marry into the Jean family and become her daughter-in-law. 7 days ago, I hadn't agreed, not wanting to hurt her feelings, but I told her I'd think about it. Yet tonight, I suddenly let go of the obsession that had consumed me for years. This one-sided infatuation now felt foolish and laughable. I didn't want to be the butt of the joke in my social circle anymore. Half a year ago, Leonardo arranged for me to continue my studies in Sea City. I'd cried fiercely back then, unwilling to leave, but he never relented. Now, I realized it was the perfect opportunity. Perhaps it was fate's way of guiding me. On the other end of the line, Aunt Zhao's laughter was filled with joy. Emmy, Elias has been waiting for your answer. He's ready to fly to the capital to propose to you. Clutching my phone, I felt my cheeks flush inexplicably, but the laughter in my ear also brought a sense of surreal calm. The person I'd lived with for 15 years, loved for 7, it turned out it only took 7 days to completely let go. Chapter 5. The day Leonardo and Juliet got engaged was the same day I left for Sea City. As a result, not many people came to see me off. After landing, I turned on my phone, and a flood of messages poured in. Most of them were about Leonardo and Juliet's engagement. I laughed it off and deleted their contacts, blocking them all. Before arriving in Sea City, I had already met Elias. I wanted to keep things simple and low profile. Elias respected my wishes. He proposed. We exchanged rings. And just like that, We were quietly engaged. Only now, my bank account had a few million more as a dowry. And my ring finger bore a plain band. As I was about to get into the car sent by the Jean family to pick me up, my phone rang. It was Leonardo's cousin, Carolina. Emmy, my brother's engagement ceremony is about to start. Where are you? I just arrived in Sea City. Then hurry back. If you leave now, you can still make it in time. Why would I go back? My voice was calm as I asked. Carolina hesitated. Emmy, have you lost your mind? If you don't come back and cause a scene, my brother will really belong to someone else. Why would I cause a scene? Isn't this a happy occasion for him? Emily? Carolina's voice rose sharply. Are you crazy? Just as I was about to hang up, Juliet's voice replaced hers. Emmy, aren't you coming to our engagement ceremony? Leonardo has always seen you as a little sister, and now I'm your sister-in-law. I was hoping for your blessing. I glanced at Elias, who stood by the car, tall and composed, his eyes gentle. A sudden sense of peace washed over me. Of course, I wish you two a lifetime of happiness, locked together forever. Chapter 6. Leonardo stood in the garden with a few friends, smoking, but occasionally, his gaze drifted toward Carolina and her group in the distance. He knew they were informing Emily, just like they always did, whenever there was a woman by his side. Those friends would immediately relay the news to Emily, and then she'd come running to cry and make a scene. He despised such behavior from women, it annoyed him, so he'd conveniently ditch those women as well. This time was no different, which was why he deliberately chose the day Emily left for Sea City. The only miscalculation was the engagement ceremony's auspicious time, set for 6 in the evening. It gave Emily just enough time to fly back and crash the event. Leonardo, what if Emily comes back and causes trouble? Yeah, you're getting engaged to someone else. She might lose it. But she's been unusually quiet lately. You and Juliet have been inseparable, and she hasn't made a sound. If it were the past, she'd have cried rivers by now. The cigarette between Leonardo's fingers burned a long ash trail. He forgot to tap it off, distracted by his friend's last remarks. Emily had indeed been uncharacteristically quiet, so much so that it felt odd. But based on what he knew about her, she wasn't the type to give up so easily. He had rejected her countless times over the years, yet she always came back stronger, never considering backing down. Perhaps she had grown a bit more composed with age. Suddenly, Leonardo smirked, extinguishing his cigarette. Just wait, she's not one to stay out of trouble. Leonardo, are you saying Emily will come back to cause a scene? Leonardo didn't respond, but he was certain of it. That girl had always been hopelessly romantic. During her teenage years, she devoured romance novels as if her life depended on it. Every ridiculous tactic she read about, she'd tried on him. He knew her well enough to bet that this sudden calmness was just a setup for a bigger move. He was sure of it by the time the engagement ceremony started. Emily would show up. Tell security to stay alert, Leonardo ordered, checking his watch. Don't let any troublemakers get in. Just as he finished speaking, Carolina came running over, holding up her skirt. Cousin, it's Emily. She's here. Her car just pulled up at the gate. Leonardo felt an inexplicable surge of excitement, quickly followed by anger. Ridiculous. She just can't change. Can she? Brother, what do we do now? If she causes a scene, the Koo family will lose face. Leonardo's expression darkened as he strode toward the gate. I'll handle her. Let's see what stunt she thinks she can pull this time. Chapter 7. A group of people followed Leonardo as he headed out. Just as they left the garden, Juliet softly called out to him. Leonardo. She was wearing a beautiful silk gown, her hair styled in an elegant braid, and her makeup was understated but exquisite. The engagement ceremony was scheduled for 6 o'clock, just a few hours away. Though anxious, Juliet showed no sign of it on her face. Why are you going out there? Leonardo paused and turned to look at her. His gaze lingered on Juliet's face. She was beautiful, a kind of beauty that easily evoked a protective instinct in men. She was nothing like Emily's unruly nature. Because of her humble background, Juliet had a naturally timid demeanor. She always spoke softly, her tone gentle and reserved. When he met Juliet, He had been exhausted by Emily's constant antics. He was easily drawn to Juliet's calm and quiet demeanor. What's more, unlike his previous girlfriends, who all pursued him eagerly, his meeting with Juliet had been a classic case of a hero rescuing a damsel in distress. Men always have a soft spot for such scenarios. And so, his feelings for Juliet were different, deeper, than the fleeting flings of the past. I heard Emmy is back. Juliet's words trailed off as her eyes turned red. I'm a little worried. She bit her lip and lowered her head. Leonardo, do you think we might not be able to finish the engagement ceremony today? What are you thinking? Leonardo placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and gave it a gentle pat. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Juliet, however, reached out and tugged on his sleeve. Leonardo, I'm scared. I'm afraid you'll leave with her. Tears began to stream down her delicate face. She stood there, fragile and petite, as if she might break at any moment. That's impossible, Juliet. Carolina interjected with a smug smile. My brother doesn't even like Emily. Carolina's tone carried a triumphant satisfaction. She's bossy and unruly, always throwing tantrums. My brother is sick of her. Why would he ever leave with her? Carolina had never liked Emily, ever since Emily was taken in by the Koo family. Carolina's uncle and aunt, who used to adore her, began prioritizing Emily over her. The excuse was always that Emily, as an adopted daughter, needed extra care for the sake of the Koo family's reputation. But that only made Carolina dislike her more. Over the years, she'd taken great pleasure in seeing Emily embarrassed and humiliated. Now that Emily had been sent off to Sea City to study, and the Koo family had gone out of their way to pack up her belongings and ship them off in advance, it was as if they couldn't wait to get rid of her. Carolina couldn't be happier. She didn't care who became her cousin-in-law, as long as it wasn't Emily. Chapter 8. Leonardo suddenly turned to Carolina. Weren't you always on good terms with Emily? Me? On good terms with her? I've always hated her. Now that things were settled, Carolina didn't bother hiding her feelings anymore. In the past, she had only pretended to be friendly with Emily to gain her trust, so she could manipulate her into causing trouble and making a fool of herself. But now, with no need for pretense, Carolina felt completely at ease. She didn't notice the subtle change in Leonardo's expression as she continued. Brother, why don't you stay with your fiancé? I'll go deal with Emily. Don't worry. I'll make sure she's thoroughly humiliated. And how do you plan to humiliate her? Have the guards throw her out? Of course. Showing up to disrupt an engagement? When word gets out, her parents will be rolling in their graves. Leonardo raised his hand abruptly. The crisp sound of a slap echoed, leaving everyone stunned. Juliet, in particular, frowned deeply, her gaze darkening as she looked at Leonardo. Brother, why did you hit me? Carolina cried, clutching her face in indignation. Emily is still my sister in name. Leonardo said coldly. You should be calling her your elder sister. His face was grim. She's been the Koo family's adopted daughter for over a decade. Carolina, by humiliating her, do you think that reflects well on the Koo family? Why are you defending her? Carolina wailed. You've always hated her, haven't you? Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed. If you didn't hate her, we wouldn't dare say such things. Leonardo stood in silence for a long moment. Did he really hate Emily as much as they claimed? He thought back to when Emily had first come to the Koo family. They had been inseparable. When Emily got hurt, he was the one who consoled her and carried her home. When she was bullied at school, he rushed over to defend her. He even bought her sanitary pads when she got her first period. Emily had always depended on him. As she grew older, her attachment to him only intensified, becoming possessive. At first, he didn't mind her clinging to him. So when had things changed? A wave of confusion washed over Leonardo, but Juliet's soft sobs brought him back to reality. Ah, that was it. Emily had changed first. As she grew older, spoiled by the Koo family's indulgence, she became unruly, willful, and domineering. She wouldn't let him get close to any other woman. Always jealous, always crying and causing a scene, it had worn him down, pushing him to distance himself from her. Even when she had begged and wept, he had sent her to Sea City to study alone. He had done it only because he wanted her to mature, to grow up. Once she had learned her lesson, he had always planned to bring her back. After all these years of shared history, how could he truly bear to leave her alone in a foreign city? Chapter 9. It seemed clear now. Emily hadn't learned her lesson. To dare act so willfully on such an important day, she truly had a knack for creating chaos. Her arrival alone had already thrown the Coup family into disarray. Leonardo pulled Juliet into his arms. "Go freshen up and have the makeup artist redo your makeup," he said gently. "I'll handle the situation with Emily and join you shortly. The engagement ceremony will proceed as planned. Don't worry." He wiped her tears before turning and walking away. Juliet stood still, watching Leonardo's retreating figure. For some reason, an inexplicable unease lingered in her heart. Carolina's earlier questioning echoed in her mind. Everyone knew how much Leonardo claimed to dislike Emily, yet he had slapped his cousin over a few disparaging remarks about her. Did he really hate Emily? Or deep down, was Emily somehow different in his eyes? Chapter 10. When Leonardo reached the gate, Emily wasn't there, but her pink Mini Cooper was parked quietly nearby. Standing next to the car was her best friend, Mary. Leonardo's steps faltered. His heart seemed to tug painfully, sinking slightly. It was then he remembered. Emily had given this car to Mary before leaving the capital. When Mary saw him, she approached immediately. She held a red envelope in her hand. Without preamble, she said, "Emmy asked me to give you and Juliet a gift." Leonardo didn't reach out to take it. Mary raised an eyebrow slightly, her tone sharpening. "There's something else. Go on," Leonardo replied. "Emmy left in a hurry and never had the chance to see you. She tried calling you a few times, but you didn't pick up. So, she never got the chance to ask for this back. Do you remember the antique brooch she gave you for your birthday? It was her mother's token of love to her father." Mary gave a sarcastic smile. "Emmy said that brooch was meant to be given to her future husband. Keeping it with you now seems inappropriate. Mr. Coup, could you return the brooch? I'll take it to her when I visit her in C City." Leonardo's gaze dropped to the sapphire brooch on his chest. He'd put it on that morning while getting dressed, though it didn't match his outfit. For reasons he couldn't explain, he hadn't taken it off. But now, looking at the brooch, it felt glaringly out of place. Meant for her future husband? The thought of Emily marrying someone else, sharing a bed with another man, it unsettled him in a way he couldn't quite name. She had always liked him. How could she marry someone else? And now, she hadn't even come in person to retrieve it. Sending Mary instead, how clever. It had indeed thrown him off balance. Chapter 11. Mr. Coup? Tell Emily this, Leonardo said after a pause. A gift, once given, isn't meant to be taken back. Of course, if she's determined to have it, she can come and ask me for it herself. He turned to leave, but Mary called after him sharply. "Wait a moment. Mr. Coup, I'll get Emily to talk to you directly." Mary's expression was resolute. What a joke. Emily was getting married soon. This brooch, with its deep sentimental value, couldn't remain in another man's possession. Emily had reminded her multiple times to bring it to her wedding so she could pin it on her husband's chest herself. Mary had long harbored resentment toward Leonardo. For years, she had watched Emily cling to him foolishly, only to be dismissed and cast aside. It infuriated her just thinking about it. But now, finally, Emily had moved on. She had found someone truly good for her. Mary was genuinely happy for her friend. This trip, she wouldn't fail in her mission. Chapter 12. I received Mary's call just as the car was approaching the Jean family estate. "Mary, what's wrong?" "Emmy, I did as you asked and tried to get the brooch from Leonardo, but he wouldn't give it to me. He said if you really want it, you should talk to him yourself." I instinctively glanced at Elias beside me, feeling a strange sense of guilt. We were still strangers in many ways. Even though he was polite, refined, and gentle, his presence was powerful and commanding, impossible to ignore. Earlier, he had taken a work call in the car, seamlessly switching between English, French, and Chinese, issuing crisp and decisive instructions. His natural air of authority only made me feel more juvenile and inexperienced by comparison. though I wasn't the quiet, reserved type. I found myself behaving more like a proper lady around Elias. Before I could respond to Mary, Leonardo's voice came through on the other end of the line. Emily, are you trying to get the brooch or just here to stir up trouble? I froze for a moment before laughing bitterly. If your goal is to disrupt my engagement with Juliet, save yourself the trouble. If you really want the brooch, then take it back the same way you gave it to me. After all, something so valuable shouldn't be handled through someone else. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my tone. Mary is my best friend. You can give it to her directly. I'll take full responsibility for the consequences. Leonardo let out a short laugh. Emily, how much clearer do I need to be? Take it back the same way you gave it to me. With that, the call ended abruptly. Anger and humiliation flooded me, my face burning red. How did I give him that brooch? It was on my 18th birthday. We were both drunk, in my bedroom on the 3rd floor of the Koo family estate. He had pinned me against the door and kissed me deeply. By the time it ended, I could barely stand, and he was clearly struggling to control himself. But in the end, he stopped. As he turned to leave, I stopped him and pressed the brooch into his hand. I explained its significance. It was a token of love from my mother to my father. He hadn't said a word but accepted it. That was when I naively believed he reciprocated my feelings. The years since had felt like a terrible dream. Now that I had woken up, I only wanted to sever all ties to the past. I thought Leonardo would be eager to rid himself of the brooch, tossing it back like unwanted garbage. I never expected him to say what he did. And in that moment, I realized that youthful foolishness always comes with a price. If the brooch didn't carry such deep meaning, I wouldn't bother taking it back. But now, with my impending marriage, leaving it with Leonardo felt unfair to Elias. Chapter 13. Is something wrong? Elias's voice broke through my thoughts. I instinctively looked up, meeting his deep gaze. Embarrassment and unease churned within me. I didn't want to hide the truth, but our unfamiliarity made it hard to explain. Nothing, I finally said, shaking my head. I resolved to ask Uncle Koo for help retrieving the brooch. With that decision made, I felt myself relax. It's just a small matter with Uncle Koo's family, I said lightly, flashing Elias a reassuring smile. I can handle it. Elias didn't press further. He simply nodded. All right. If anything becomes difficult, Emmy, you can always come to me. After all, you're my fiancée now. He addressed me just as Aunt Zhao always did, though it wasn't the first time. Hearing him say fiancée made my ears flush red. The warmth spread down to the back of my neck. I was engaged now. In just half a month, I'd be married to him. A mixture of sourness and sweetness welled up inside me. It was faint, but there was also a flicker of hope and anticipation. I avoided his gaze, quickly nodding with a soft hum of acknowledgement. Elias said no more. When we arrived at the Jean estate, he stepped out first, then turned to help me out of the car. I noticed the engagement ring on his middle finger. Since the day he put it on, he hadn't taken it off. As he helped me out, he didn't release my hand. Instead, he held it naturally. At first, I felt a little uncomfortable, but his palm was warm and dry, his long fingers strong yet gentle. The contact unexpectedly calmed me. It felt as if this was exactly how things were meant to be. In the distance, Aunt Zhao spotted us holding hands and immediately smiled in satisfaction. Before we could even get close, she rushed forward to meet us. She wrapped me in a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. Emmy, you look so much like your mother when she was young. My tears came flooding out. She smelled wonderful, just like the faint memory of my mother's scent. Elias stood nearby, shaking his head with a helpless smile. He handed us tissues. Auntie, if you and Emmy keep crying like this, people might think my father and I bullied you too. Aunt Zhao, who married Elias's father at 40, never had children of her own. She treated her stepchildren as her own, and Elias always respected her deeply. I had known all this for a long time, but I still didn't understand why Elias agreed to this verbal engagement. After all, it had nothing to do with him. Aunt Zhao had simply reassured me to trust her, saying I'd understand one day, so I hadn't pressed further. Aunt Zhao laughed at Elias's remark and wiped my tears before taking my hand tightly. Emmy, come home with Auntie now. Instinctively, I looked at Elias. He was already looking at me. The greenery behind him framed him like a painting. When our eyes met, his gaze softened into a gentle smile. He extended his hand to me. Emmy, let's go home. Chapter 14. 20 minutes remained until 6 o'clock. Juliet was already fully prepared, her makeup and attire immaculate, but Leonardo had yet to emerge from the lounge upstairs. After hesitating for a moment, Juliet decided to head over. The door to the lounge wasn't locked, and faint voices could be heard inside. Juliet quietly approached. Leonardo, are you sure Emily won't come back? If she planned to, she'd already be here. At this point, she couldn't make it even with a rocket. Leonardo, I've been meaning to ask you this for a while. Do you really feel nothing for Emily? You two grew up together. She's beautiful, pure, and her heart has always been set on you. Juliet instinctively held her breath. There was silence inside for a long moment before Leonardo's voice finally came. No feelings. Could you have feelings for a little girl? Leonardo scoffed. He was 5 years older than Emily. When she first came to the Ku family, she was just starting elementary school, even as she grew older and blossomed into a stunning young woman. Leonardo couldn't help but think back to her 18th birthday. He must have been out of his mind that night, allowing himself to be so bewitched that he kissed her, and even accepted that brooch. But Emily is very beautiful now. The other voice pressed. She is. Several of my friends are interested in her. Remember last year's horse race? Of course, she wore that Red Riding outfit and won first place. I still remember how radiant she looked on the podium, smiling as she took off her hat. Leonardo remembered it vividly. That day, Emily had been overjoyed, chattering endlessly with him. She showed off her trophy and her horse, and couldn't stop talking about how handsome the guest presenter was, though she admitted she only glanced at him because she was thinking of Leonardo. Leonardo's lips curved faintly. Both he and Emily loved horseback riding. Her horse was still stabled at the Ku family's ranch. Suddenly, the door was pushed open. Leonardo. Juliet stepped in, wearing a pearl satin white gown. The dress was a replica of the one Lady Ku had worn at her own engagement ceremony. Lady Ku, despite her humble origins, had been the subject of a heroic rescue by her future husband, a romantic tale that people still talked about to this day. Leonardo had always been proudest of his parents' deep love for each other. Perhaps it was why he'd been drawn to Juliet after saving her. Now, standing before him, Juliet resembled his mother's graceful beauty in those old photographs. Leonardo's heart softened, even if he had never truly envisioned marrying Juliet. Today, he would at least give her a perfect engagement ceremony. Leonardo stood and extended his hand to her. Juliet smiled gently, lifting her skirt as she approached him. I was worried since you hadn't come downstairs yet. It's fine. Let's go now. Has everything with Emmy been handled? Yes. Leonardo's gaze briefly fell on the sapphire brooch pinned to his chest. Emily is unruly, and you're gentle by nature. From now on, let her stay in Sea City. She won't be allowed back. Juliet's heart leapt with joy, though she maintained a look of concern. Won't that be a bit harsh? She asked softly. Emily has always been pampered. Won't she feel wronged living alone out there? Leonardo's voice was cold. A little hardship will teach her to grow up. Juliet said no more, dutifully taking his arm as they descended the stairs. 6 o'clock arrived. Her engagement ceremony was about to begin. From this day forward, her life would change forever. No more shabby homes. No more crowded rooms shared with her sisters. Her family would rise with her, reaping the benefits of her new life. Leonardo was her heaven-sent opportunity to leap across social classes, and she would never let go. Chapter 15. My wedding to Elias was scheduled for just half a month later. The timeline was tight, but the Jean family, deeply valuing the eldest son's marriage, had been preparing for years. Despite the busyness, everything progressed smoothly. Aunt Zhao shared a story with me. When Elias was a child, he had suffered a severe illness. After he recovered, the Jean family took him to see a white dragon king. The prophecy declared he must marry in September of his 27th year. If he did, his life would be prosperous, healthy, and blessed with great wealth. The Jean family elders deeply believed in this. When Aunt Zhao first mentioned this marriage to me over the phone, the Jean family had already compared our birth charts. They determined that Elias and I were perfectly matched, destined by fate. So when I agreed to the engagement, the entire Jean family was overjoyed. I received countless precious gifts. But the most meaningful was a pair of jade bracelets left by Elias's late mother. When Elias handed them to me, I was deeply moved but also felt a pang of guilt. The most suitable return gift would have been the brooch my mother had given my father, but it was still with Leonardo. Perhaps sensing my mood, Elias led me into the garden. "Emily, are you unhappy?" His tone was gentle, his jade green bracelet glinting softly in the sunlight. Even someone as ignorant of treasures as I knew their immense value, I'd always felt uneasy accepting kindness from others. When people were good to me, I wanted to repay them tenfold. But no matter how much I thought about a gift for Elias, nothing seemed good enough. The guilt and unease gnawed at me, but when I met Elias's kind gaze, for some reason, the tears I had held back all this time began to fall. Elias seemed flustered, though a perfect gentleman and heir of a prestigious family. He clearly lacked experience comforting crying women. He clumsily dabbed at my tears with his handkerchief. Between sobs, I laughed. "Elias, you've smudged my makeup." "Were you wearing makeup?" he asked earnestly. "Isn't it obvious? I thought you were just naturally stunning." I admit I'm a little vain sometimes, but that simple compliment cheered me up instantly. "Elias, you're so good at flattering women. Have you had many girlfriends? Do kindergarten crushes count?" My eyes widened. "You haven't dated anyone since then?" If I said no, it would be a lie. I had a girlfriend in college abroad, but we realized we weren't compatible and parted amicably. "And since then, have you liked anyone?" Elias hesitated briefly. "I have, but she didn't feel the same way." I felt a quiet realization settle over me. So that's how it was. Perhaps he agreed to this engagement because the one he loved was unattainable. A twinge of bitterness crept into my heart. But just as quickly, I consoled myself. This was better. At least I wouldn't feel too guilty. As we left the Jean estate that day, Elias turned to me. "Emily, I hope you'll truly see me as your future husband. I know you're independent and capable, but occasionally relying on me would make me happy." His words opened something in my heart. "I will, Elias. I promised." As a first gift, I gave him a set of cufflinks and a tie clip. They weren't particularly extravagant, but I had designed them myself on a whim some time ago. This gift was untainted by past attachments, created simply from missing my parents. Each pencil line a reflection of that longing. Chapter 16. My wedding preparations were now in full swing. Yet, the Jean family had not publicly revealed who the bride was. I had just started at a new school and didn't want to draw attention. Besides, there were still loose ends with Leonardo that needed tying up. When Leonardo arranged for me to move to Sea City for school, it was clear he had decided that he didn't want me returning to the capital. So, when the house staff packed my belongings, they sent almost everything I owned to Sea City, including all the gifts Leonardo had given me over the years. Among them was an especially valuable pink diamond ring, a gift from my 18th birthday. I had once cherished it as a treasure. Whenever I felt sad, just looking at the ring would cheer me up. After all, a gift like a ring carries a special meaning. But now, I had come to understand, when someone doesn't truly love you, or if their feelings for you are not pure, even a formal engagement would be nothing more than an empty gesture. And possessions? They're even less meaningful. As I sorted through and packed away everything Leonardo had given me, I was surprised by how calm I felt. Not a ripple of emotion disturbed me. By the time my jewelry box was empty, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. While preparing to send the items back, a few messages came through on my phone. They were from the staff at the stables. My horse had fallen ill, refusing to eat or move much. Seeing the photos, my eyes immediately turned red. The staff explained that the horse likely missed me. After all, I used to visit it regularly, but I hadn't gone in weeks. I quickly called the stable for more details. "Miss Emily, Mr. Koo happens to be here. Let me hand the phone to him," the staff member said. I froze as Leonardo's voice came through, clear and familiar. Emily, do you remember what you said when you decided to raise that horse? Of course. I remembered. Every Koo family child was allowed a pet. But the rule was that you had to take full responsibility for it. Abandonment was never an option. But wasn't it you who decided I should go to Sea City 6 months ago? Leonardo let out a cold laugh. When have you ever been one to follow orders? Since you were a child. Haven't you always been rebellious? Throwing tantrums whenever you didn't get your way? Mom and Dad doted on you so much that a single tear from you would have made them cancel the whole plan. Clearly, you don't care as much about your horse as you claimed. At that moment, Leonardo's heart skipped a beat. His own words echoed back to him with unexpected clarity. Was it possible that Emily didn't care about him, either? If she did, she wouldn't have gone to Sea City. She wouldn't have remained indifferent to his engagement. She wouldn't have stayed away on the day of his ceremony. And she certainly wouldn't have asked for the brooch she had once given him. Chapter 17. I'll make time to visit. I said calmly. If possible, I'll bring it to Sea City. Do you plan to stay in Sea City forever? Leonardo asked. His tone edged with anger. I lowered my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. Most likely. After all, I was about to get married. My life would naturally shift here. But there was no need to tell Leonardo that. Emily, you're still as childish and stubborn as ever. He snapped. You've learned nothing. His voice grew colder. You'd better not regret this. Emily, regret what? I asked lightly. My engagement to Juliet is finalized. The wedding date is being set. And then? Don't tell me you don't understand. Emily, if I really marry Juliet, I interrupted him with a laugh. Light and carefree. Leonardo, I will sincerely wish you both happiness. Truly. On the other end of the line, Leonardo fell silent. I didn't wait for him to respond. I gently hung up. At 16, my first love had blossomed. Stubborn and all-consuming. I had stopped calling him brother and instead clung to him as something more. 6 years had passed since then. Now, he had returned to the role he was always meant to play. I didn't hate him. I didn't resent him. After so many years of shared memories, I wished him well from the bottom of my heart. Chapter 18. I called Uncle Koo. After checking in on him and Aunt Koo, I broached the topic of the brooch. Uncle, I made many foolish mistakes in my youth. Looking back now, I feel regret and embarrassment. Since Leonardo is engaged, I think it's best to avoid any unnecessary misunderstandings. Uncle Koo sighed over the phone. Emmy, you've always been like a daughter to me. I had hoped you might one day truly become my daughter-in-law. Your aunt has been in tears every time she talks about you. My chest ached at his words. It wasn't about Leonardo anymore. It was the genuine care of two elders who loved me deeply. Uncle, feelings can't be forced. I said softly. You've been through so much. Emmy, it's not a hardship. Uncle, I've come to terms with everything. I'll speak to Leonardo and get the brooch back for you. He promised. In a few days, your aunt and I will be in Sea City for a wedding. I'll deliver it to you personally then. I thanked him and ended the call. Just then, the courier arrived to collect the package. The neatly packed box of gifts was loaded onto the truck. In a few days, it would arrive safely at Leonardo's hands. And soon, when Uncle Koo brought me the sapphire brooch, it would mark the end of all the foolishness of my youth. From then on, our lives would diverge, each following its own path. Chapter 19. Leonardo had once again drunk too much at a gathering with friends. As he stepped out of the restroom, he overheard Mary talking on the phone. Aw, babe, I'm heading to Sea City tomorrow. You promised I'd be your only bridesmaid. Oh, and did you handpick the groomsmen just for me? What? You picked 7 groomsmen to keep me company? Emmy, you're the best. I love you. Babe. Leonardo stood in the long, empty hallway, Mary's joyful voice echoing in his ears. But in the end, only one word lingered, Emmy. He thought he must really be drunk. Otherwise, why would he hear such an absurd and laughable idea? Yes, he was definitely drunk. That had to be why he was imagining things. Or maybe, he just missed Emily so much that he mistook someone else's name for hers. Leonardo suddenly stumbled toward her. Mary. Mary jumped at the sound of his voice. Leonardo? Who were you talking to just now? Leonardo's gaze locked onto hers, intense and unrelenting. I heard you mention going to C-City for a wedding, and I heard Emily's name. His handsome face was slightly twisted, and his typically charming eyes were bloodshot. He smiled faintly, but the expression was cold and unnerving. Don't tell me you're going to Emily's wedding. Mary was initially startled by his appearance, but she quickly composed herself, her heart filling with satisfaction. How ironic. 4 years. She had been furious and heartbroken over Emily's pain, but now, seeing the great Leonardo Coup in such a state brought her immense satisfaction. The mighty eldest son of the Coup family finally had his turn. He had enjoyed playing with others' feelings, watching them pine and suffer for him. Now, he could savor this bitter taste himself, but Mary wasn't about to tell him the truth. Emily had asked her to keep quiet, and she wasn't going to let Leonardo ruin anything. This was her best friend's happiest day, and she would never let this toxic man ruin it. You misheard, Mary said coolly. Yes, I'm going to C-City for a wedding, and Emily will be there too, but the one getting married is an old classmate of ours. Leonardo looked unconvinced. I don't recall Emily having any close classmates in C-City. Mary smiled knowingly. Leonardo, have you ever really cared about Emily? Truly tried to understand her? Have you ever considered her feelings or thought about things from her perspective? No, you haven't, Mary said bluntly. You don't know how wonderful Emily is, and you never deserved her affection all these years. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Leonardo standing frozen in the hallway. For some reason, his chest began to ache, but he didn't understand why. All he knew was that he suddenly felt an overwhelming, desperate need to see Emily, even if only for a moment. The next day, Leonardo received a large shipment from C-City. Thanks to Elias's meticulous planning, the Jean family's logistics team had arranged for an express delivery. Meanwhile, I was completely unaware of any of this. I was too busy with the final wedding rehearsal, oblivious to what Leonardo might feel when he opened that box. Chapter 20. Leonardo's hands trembled slightly as he opened the boxes. At first, the items inside felt unfamiliar, but as he unpacked them, a flood of memories rushed over him like a tidal wave. The first Hermes bag he gave Emily, the first pearl necklace, the keys to her first car, a box full of colorful gemstones, and finally, the pink diamond ring. Leonardo held the small pink box in his hand, his vision blurring. Leonardo, when are you going to marry your little ward? He remembered how his friends used to tease him. Back then, he was young, arrogant, and full of himself. He had plenty of admirers but never looked at any of them twice. Emily, at 18, had been beautiful and radiant, like a ripe peach. Taking her out had made him the envy of everyone, and he had secretly reveled in it. After all, such a stunning Emily only had eyes for him. He had wanted to marry her then. In fact, he'd always known that one day, he would. That was why he gave her the pink diamond ring. But when had things changed? When had he started growing tired of her? And when had Juliet taken her place? Was it because he truly stopped loving her? Or because he had been so sure she would never leave him? Leonardo clutched the ring tightly, tears streaming down his face. Chapter 21. While I was busy with the final wedding rehearsal, I had no idea Leonardo was unpacking 10 years' worth of gifts. I had no idea how he reacted when he saw the pink diamond ring I once treasured, and when Elias kissed me for the first time during the rehearsal. I didn't know that Leonardo, at that moment, slapped Juliet across the face because of that ring. How ironic. That day, when Juliet had knelt to frame me, when Leonardo had shoved me and caused me to injure my knee. None of us could have imagined this moment would come, but Leonardo and Juliet no longer mattered to me. They were insignificant figures in my life. I no longer cared about them at all. Chapter 22. When Uncle Coup brought me the sapphire brooch, I shared the news of my upcoming wedding. Both he and Aunt Coup were taken by surprise. After all, the wedding they had traveled to Hong Kong for was none other than the Jean family's grand celebration for their eldest son's marriage. And the mysterious bride, whose identity had eluded even the sharpest Hong Kong media, turned out to be me. They were happy for me, but their joy was tinged with bittersweet tears, especially Aunt Koo. She clutched my hand tightly, refusing to let go. Emmy, I don't want to cry on your wedding day, but I can't help it, she said, her voice thick with regret. It's my fault for failing to raise my son properly. One misstep led to another. Leonardo had decided to break up with Juliet, but Juliet refused to let go. And her entire family had stormed the Koo residence, threatening to stay until things were resolved. They had nothing to lose, and they made it clear. Amidst the chaos, it was revealed that Juliet was pregnant. The Koo family, unwilling to force her into an abortion, had little choice but to proceed with the marriage. As I rested my head on Aunt Koo's shoulder, my eyes grew red. I thought back to when I first came to the Koo family, crying every night for my parents, to Aunt Koo holding and comforting me, night after night, to the carefree days of being loved like their own child. And, at last, the tears I had been holding back began to fall. Emmy, it's Leonardo's loss, Aunt Koo said, wiping my tears with a sigh. But I'm so relieved for you. The Jean family has an impeccable reputation, and Elias is one of the brightest stars of his generation. Emmy, you will be happy. Chapter 23. I knew that with a gentle and refined man like Elias, even without love, my life after marriage would be peaceful and fulfilling, but I never expected that my happiness would far exceed my imagination. On the day I pinned the sapphire brooch onto Elias's chest, he showed me a photograph. In it, I was standing on a podium, clutching a trophy, smiling radiantly at someone off camera, and beside me in the photograph, smiling at me, was Elias. It was from that horse racing event where I had won the championship. The man who had presented me with my trophy was Elias. Back then, my mind had been completely preoccupied with Leonardo. I had only glanced briefly at Elias, noting his youth and striking good looks. Never in my wildest dreams had I imagined he would become part of my future. I laughed and cried, pointing at the photo like a child, unable to form words. Elias wrapped his arms around me from behind. Do you remember I once told you that I had someone I liked? He touched the brooch gently, resting his chin against my neck. Emily, I once told myself, he murmured, the day I received this sapphire brooch would be the day I told you. The person I've always cared for is you. Chapter 24. As a teenager, I loved reading romance novels. There was one phrase often used to describe male leads, a beast dressed in clothes. It was meant to be half-joking praise. Of course, but I never imagined that Elias could embody such a phrase. On our wedding day, he looked every bit the gentleman, handsome, poised, and graceful, like a serene mountain cloaked in snow. But on our wedding night, once the groom's attire was discarded, he became a completely different man. For the first time, I heard tender, fiery words of love whispered to me. For the first time, I was called baby again and again, in a voice so warm it burned. For the first time, I was guided patiently, through moments both awkward and beautiful. For the first time, I cried from discomfort, and later from pleasure. For the first time, I learned the ways of love, an intoxicating, unrelenting, and exhilarating night. The next morning, I slept until noon, while I remained blissfully lost in dreams. Elias had already finished his morning run, his workout, breakfast, reading the news, and more. Days after the wedding, the household staff shared stories with me, laughing as they spoke. Madam, you wouldn't believe how much Mr. Jean smiled that day. Yes, I've been with the Jean family for years, and I've never seen him so talkative in the morning. He greeted everyone, even my little grandson. I think if he could, he'd carry a megaphone and tell the whole world he's married and absolutely adores his bride. Embarrassed and amused, I quickly fled to the garden. From a distance, I saw Elias's car pulling into the driveway. As he stepped out, he handed his coat and briefcase to the staff, and immediately turned to look for me. Elias! Standing among the flowers, I waved and jumped excitedly. My horse had arrived in Sea City yesterday. Thanks to Elias's arrangements, it had been carefully tended to and was perfectly at ease in its new home. When I saw it, it had happily circled around me, full of energy. Elias smiled when he saw me smile, He pushed aside the greenery in his path and walked toward me. And as he approached, I ran to meet him. He stopped in his tracks, shaking his head with mock exasperation, but he opened his arms wide. And when I reached him, he wrapped me tightly in his embrace. Extra Story 1. Leonardo only found out about Emily's wedding on the day she got married. At first, he refused to believe it. He even naively thought the so-called wedding was just a performance orchestrated by Emily, a scene akin to his engagement with Juliet, superficial and meaningless. But then, a friend sent him photos from the wedding venue. He saw Emily in a white bridal gown, standing beside her groom. He saw his parents sitting in the VIP section. He saw Mary, dressed as a bridesmaid, crying so much her makeup was ruined. He saw the handsome, dignified groom kissing the bride. He saw the bride shedding tears of joy. And then, Leonardo heard a deafening crash within himself. As if something had collapsed irreparably. He felt dazed, unable to hear what his friends were saying. All that echoed in his ears was one phrase. Emily got married. Emily. She was now someone else's wife. But hadn't she always liked him? Hadn't her greatest wish since childhood been to marry him and become his bride? On her 18th birthday, she had personally given him the most meaningful gift, a sapphire brooch. They had agreed, hadn't they? And if he truly felt nothing for her, why had he tolerated her antics all these years? The truth was, it wasn't antics at all. If he were being honest, he had selfishly used Emily. Back then, he was young, reckless, and indulgent, a privileged son of wealth and status, constantly surrounded by girls vying for his attention. He relished their admiration, their jealousy, their fights for his favor, but he never took them seriously, knowing they were just fleeting entertainment. Emily had said he broke up with 4 girlfriends because of her tears. What she didn't know was that none of those women were ever his girlfriends. He grew bored after a few days of flirtation and wanted to end it. But as a charming playboy, he couldn't be the bad guy. And that's where his childhood companion Emily came in. He deliberately let others incite her. She was so young back then, so innocent and temperamental. With a little prodding from Carolina or someone else, she would explode like a firecracker. Rushing to confront him, he pretended to be annoyed, publicly breaking up with the other girl, while secretly feeling a twisted sense of joy. He loved seeing Emily jealous, loved seeing her cry, her face streaked with tears because of the girls around him. She was so endearing, so pitiful, and so easy to placate. All it took was a few soft words, a small gift, or accompanying her in her whims, and she would smile again. He thought this time would be no different. He thought no matter how badly he messed up, he could always win Emily back. Where else could she go? She had no parents and had lived with the Koo family since she was a child. Surely she wouldn't be able to marry into another family. Everyone had assumed they would end up together someday, even after he impulsively got engaged to Juliet. But now, Emily was married. She had a husband. She had someone else by her side, and he no longer had any right to stand beside her. Extra Story 2. The day Emily and her husband Elias visited her family, Leonardo had just had a massive argument with Juliet. He had moved out of their shared home, determined to sever ties completely. It was only when a friend sent him a video from a hotel hallway that he fully realized the truth. From the very beginning, his relationship with Juliet had been nothing but a scheme. The seemingly innocent and pitiful Juliet was, in reality, calculating and manipulative. He couldn't bear to recall the events of that day, couldn't bring himself to think about how hurt and humiliated Emily must have been. He wished he could go back in time and strangle the version of himself who had failed her so completely. They had grown up together for 15 years. Why, in that moment, had he lost his mind and chosen not to believe her? That was the moment he had truly lost Emily. The moment she had slipped away from him forever. Now, as Emily's husband walked into the room holding her hand, Leonardo's eyes were drawn to the sapphire brooch pinned to the man's chest. His heart felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 needles. The pain was overwhelming, inescapable, but he forced himself to stay composed. Standing quietly behind his parents, watching her happiness from a distance, he didn't say a word that day. He didn't even dare look at Emily directly. His hands, clenched on his knees, were gripping so tightly they left marks in his palms. But he couldn't feel the pain. He marveled at his own self-control. How could he maintain a calm smile from beginning to end? Only when Emily was leaving did he feel his face stiffen. Before she left, she called out to him. "Brother," she said, just as she had when she first came to their family as a child. He heard it clearly, saw it plainly. Emily no longer had any romantic feelings for him. Her final words to him that day were, "I hope you find happiness, just like I have." He nodded, but inside, he was bitterly laughing. Happiness? He couldn't tell her that. Extra Story 3. After breaking up with Juliet, the Coup family became embroiled in a humiliating scandal. Juliet revealed she was pregnant. His parents, unwilling to let the family's reputation suffer further, tried to compromise again, but Leonardo was resolute. He didn't want Juliet or the child. He couldn't accept a wife or a mother for his child who had been manipulative from the very start. The so-called damsel in distress scenario. The supposed reenactment of his parents' love story. It was all a lie, carefully calculated for Juliet's rise. He forced Juliet to leave, but she refused. When his firm stance became clear, Juliet brought her entire family into the Coup residence. They were shameless, unrelenting, and used every dirty trick in the book. The Coup family, known for their scholarly reputation, couldn't endure the disgrace. Leonardo couldn't even call the police. Overwhelmed, he had no choice but to bribe them to leave. But tasting the sweetness of money only emboldened them. They were like leeches, vampires, maggots on a bone, an unending nightmare, exhausted by Juliet and her family's antics. And as her pregnancy became increasingly visible, Leonardo finally decided to rip the facade apart. When the police came and removed Juliet's family from the Coup estate, she realized she had lost. She demanded a large sum of money. On the day of their final confrontation, Leonardo felt as though he was meeting Juliet for the first time. Her beautiful face twisted with greed, selfishness, and cruelty. When he handed her the money, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly at himself. He laughed at his own stupidity, the things he had taken for granted in his youth, the companionship he had dismissed as ordinary. A real man cherishes his partner, nurturing her beauty and love, and he had failed, proving himself a fool. Later, Emily's husband arranged to bring her horse to Sea City. When Leonardo went to the stables, her horse was already gone. All that remained was his own. Standing alone in the stable, he mounted it and rode hard into the wind, galloping in endless circles until he let go of the reins and closed his eyes. He fell, breaking his leg, but survived. His parents wept by his bedside. It was only then, through the haze of pain, that Leonardo finally grew up. He comforted his parents and resolved that his life could no longer remain so reckless. Not long after Juliet's return to her family, she was sentenced to prison for extortion. Her father and brother, who had caused the worst of the chaos, were imprisoned as well. The remaining members of her family quickly scattered, returning to their hometown with the money they had extorted. Juliet's mother, devastated by the shame, cursed her daughter bitterly. Meanwhile, in Sea City, Emily's new life was unfolding like a fresh canvas. Bright and full of promise,